Basically I run a coaching business, Pro VO2. I've been a sports coach for about the last 20 years. Did sports science initially, so it's my interest in testing. The last 10 years, 12 years, predominantly trained cyclists and triathletes, mainly people that are doing Ironman or half Ironman, that sort of thing. I did race competitively years ago, and then unfortunately got blamed in the head for a bit, but slowly getting back there now, sitting on your wheel. Yeah, so most of the people that I train are either doing triathlon or cycling, which I guess is that. Obviously, you guys are you cyclists or triathletes?
Neither. I work with a lot of cyclists. I train physio.
Oh, cool.
So,
excellent.
I've been to a couple of demos.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, so I'm trying to get better and stuff.
Understand.
Refresh my mind.
Yeah. Good stuff. Excellent. Where did you do that? Where's
I study over at Brunel.
Oh, yeah.
I work in a small corporate gym in Victoria.
Yeah.
With a lot of money.
Yeah.
Got very keen on cycling over the last 7 years.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Obviously this testing, we do it for performance testing if you're doing obviously sport, but even from a health and fitness point of view, the metabolic testing is really good for weight loss. And obviously if you can then see, there is another test we do a resting test as well, which we're not going to demonstrate today, but basically that you just come along, that would normally be the initial test we would do, and that lasts about 10-15 minutes. You just sit there, relax.
It's really entertaining. Basically just sit in a chair.
Yeah, you get to chill out then. And that one measures all of your resting metabolic rate, so how many calories your body needs, per day. Then obviously you can work out from there on training days or non-training days, how much you should be eating. So from a weight loss point of view, or a weight gain point of view even, you can be precise with that. You can work out a plan. So even if you're training sort of more Joe public fitness clients, that often most people come do cycling because they want to lose weight or get fit, then it has, it does have that effect as well. It's not just for sort of probably somebody that's more serious about racing and really looking at all the numbers. And yourself, you're doing cycling? Oh, cool. Yeah. Have you got any races that you're doing?
Not a huge amount this year. I just had a second child. So,
okay.
So trying to find efficiency gains in my training really, so I can actually sort of train sort of.
That's really the key, and sort of. I mean, one of the biggest things that you get from this is, which we've sort of just started to talk about, is you'll find out your exact anaerobic threshold, and from there then set the exact heart rate training zones. And often when you do field tests or you do, warm up and then 20 minutes on your heart rate, average heart rate, usually field tests will put your threshold a bit higher, because most of us are used to working 5 beats above our threshold or whatnot. So that 5 beats higher. So, and there's obviously lots of other different ways to work out or guesstimate your zone. So most, especially things like 220 monitor age and max heart rate stuff, I mean, that could have your zones like 10, 15 beats out, and then what you think you're going out there and doing a 4-hour fat burning ride or whatever, you could actually be working up in zone 4 and burning a load of sugar and not actually getting that effect. So from a time efficiency point of view, and for everyone wants to be utilising that time as productively as possible. So then you can be precise. There is the reports that you get, and I'll show you all of these once we've done it, are quite easy to understand. So you'll get your anaerobic thresholds, you'll have all your heart rate training zones set from there. You'll see what your threshold is, what your VO2 is around your threshold. You'll get an average of how much fats to sugars you're burning in each zone. But then also we can give you the raw data, which basically has every heart rate and will show what fats to sugars you're burning at those heart rates. So
And also the power at each.
And the power.
The wattage at each.
yeah, at the wattage. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you're doing a bike test, then the way that we'll do it is we're going to put the wattage up, so you can get an idea of what your functional threshold power is around your anaerobic threshold. And yeah, I mean power. We would normally do that, and then we would do an actual power test as well. We'd do a kind of a 20-minute test as well. But usually they're quite close. So yeah, you will get that information. Yeah, on the raw data, so you can see exactly how much fats to sugars you're burning on each heart rate. So from a weight loss point of view or a fitness point of view, if you've got more, if you're trying to do that, you can say, okay, at 132 heart rate, I'm burning 10 calories of fat, the maximum. You can see exactly where the maximum amount of fat you're burning. So if you were looking to go and, you only had an hour, and that's probably what you were trying to do, you knew that you could target that, and obviously through training you'd see that come up.
And as you were saying earlier about the sports specificity, if you're running at 130 heart rate and cycling at 130 heart rate, the fat burn can be different on that. You're saying it's not a heart. It's a certain sport specific heart rate. Fat burn. Efficiency.
Definitely. Yeah. So it just depends on which one you're doing.
Yeah, you see the run's a bit higher.
Yeah, and then the other thing you can work out from there as well is if you're racing, whether it be triathlon or cycling, if we see at heart rate, let's say you're going to race an Ironman and you knew you were targeting X amount of watts for 5 hours and you were going to be working between these heart rate zones, then you could say, okay, right, I'm going to be working at an average of 140 for the bike, and that means I'm burning X amount of fat per minute, and you can then work out how much sugar you're burning, so how much carbohydrate you're burning, and then work out a nutrition plan. So you say, okay, I'm burning 400 calories or 500 calories of sugar an hour, that's what I need to replace.
With external factors, like we've all sort of gone on a race and you sort of ride off and your heart rate's gone through the roof. It's the adrenaline effect. Does the fact your heart rate's up higher, is that directly proportional to your fat burn, or does these external factors change your fat burn, like you've had coffee or something, or so your heart rate's around? Is this sort of scoring?
It can.
I
mean,
there are test in a certain environment. So
there
are test and a non-coffee test, or
there are. I mean, there are obviously things like that, and things like coffee. Can increase your fat burning effect. So there are factors that like that would affect it. I think if you're racing, then normally at the start of a cycling race, or if you come out of the swim, onto the bike, then usually your heart rate's ramped up quite high, and then obviously adrenaline and everything else. That's where you need to look at what you've done in training as well. So obviously when we do this testing, then this is what we use for our training, but then we can use these zones for racing, but your heart rate will be amped up. So that's where you need to look at. If your heart rate's 10 beats higher, but your pace is where it was at within the right zone when you're training, and then it will start to settle down into that zone. Then you get a dashboard of things to look at, and then you can kind of figure out.
You kind of sort of suck this in.
Exactly. Right. Let's get you ready. You've got your Dolly Parton on. 9 to 5, yeah. Okay. So, just carry on warming up a minute.
So does he have to be warm? Sorry, I probably missed the start of what you thought about. Does he have to be warm then before you test? So is it important the heart rates have been raised for a bit?
We're literally just warming his legs up. So basically, all of these tests, you're doing them from pretty much a non-warmed up position. So that's why often things like max heart rate you won't necessarily get on a metabolic test.
Okay.
You know, some people will get close to them, most people will get close to it, but you are doing it from a relatively non-warmed up position.
Okay. And there's no benefit to sit there for half an hour warming up first. It's just a time thing.
There would be in terms of hitting a maximum VO2. You know, trying to get a little bit higher, but then things like fat utilisation will change. So you know, you start to train more, or say if you've been on the bike for an hour, then you know this fat burn is going to be kicking in.
Have you done sort of back-to-back tests where someone's been cold and then been exercising for an hour or 2 hours and seen difference? I mean, is there a big variance? I mean, if I'm out for a ride, I might just notice kind of moving. Am my fat utilization changing as I'm warming up?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, there are, you know, there shouldn't be much difference in how much fat you're utilising at those heart rates. Obviously, that will change through time, but if it was, you know, you did one straight off the bat or the next day, then no, there shouldn't be much difference. I mean, the only difference would be, you know, if you had, maybe if you've been out for a long ride, you know, and then you came in and you sort of jumped on, then you know, your fat burning might be up a little bit high. But yeah, it shouldn't be massive. Your weight last time you did it was 72.5, so 71.5. Yeah. Tight up. Yeah. Breathe that one. Yeah. It's okay. Bring it down a little bit. Just okay. Again. Just let your heart rate come down a little. Okay, so we're going to start the test. Basically, it's going to be, we're going to start at 80 watts for Ryan today, and we're going to move up 10 watts every 30 seconds, so it's progressively going to get harder. We've got time measured in millilitres per kilogram per minute, going on there, volume of CO2. The RQ, that's a respiratory quotient. Basically, it's the ratio of fats to sugars you're burning. So at 0.7, you're 100% fat burning cell. As it moves up and the exercise starts to increase and you start to burn less fat and more sugar, you'll get to RQ1 where you completely stop burning fat. After RQ1, then you're working 100% anaerobically, okay, only sugar. We've got heart rate next to the RQ, and then we've got just about on the screen, we've got fat, how much fat, calories per minute, and then how many total calories there as well. There is percentage of fat as well, and watts, but unfortunately we tried a few times before, didn't we, to get it, and I think this is about as most we could squeeze on the projector. Okay, so yeah, that's good. Alright, so nice and easy for the first minute, not too fast on your Hayden. Normally it takes about 30 seconds or so for the first reading to come through. There we go. That's going up to 90 watts now. The RQ usually starts off a little bit higher and then it will drop back down into more of a fat burning state, and then it will slowly start to rise up. So 100 watts now. Heart rate 193. Yeah, there you go, 0.8 now.
That seems sort of calming down a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Normally when we start exercise, we start in oxygen depth, so we actually start a bit more anaerobically, and then we calm down, and then we, move into fat. So 0.74. So that over here, that would be probably about 85–90% fat burning at the moment. And VO2 is currently on 23.5. Going 3. So now heart rate slowly really starting to rise. We want to get as much heart rate information as possible to the zone. And 130 watts now. Here, Ryan's starting to breathe a bit heavier. Still burning fat. 350 watts. Awesome. Good wattage. Really good wattage. 178 heart rate. VO2 is 16.7. You got 69 the last time, so 69 to beat. 360 watts. 181 heart rate, 0.94. 63.2 VO2. Easy. Loading, mate. Loading. That's it, going up to 370 watts. That's it. Keep taking stuff and taking stuff. 182 heart rate, 0.95. 63.8 VO2, 64.9. VO2. 66.5. Going up to 380 watts. 184 heart rate. That's it. Keep it going. 0.98. Keep going. Loading it. Come on, loading it. And start to ramp up again in a minute. Yeah, keep it going. Going up, 390, keep going, come on. Don't stop. 185 heart rate. Keep pushing. Keep it going, come on. Keep going. Don't stop, keep going. Off there, and relax. Okay, just going to do your recovery quickly. Just keep the mask on a minute. That's it. Just stop. Okay, going to do 2 minutes recovery days. That. So just doing a couple of minutes recovery days. There's some interesting improvements from the last time we did it, even though the VO2 peak didn't get as high, which I'll go through once we've done the recovery.
Makes sense.
Exactly, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Basically what it is, let's just come down a bit. Depending on obviously what type of training we're doing for our periodisation and time of year and everything. So the last test we did was at the beginning of the year after winter. And it's a lot of short, sharp, sessions, a lot of anaerobic sessions, not hardly any long fat burning rides because the weather was so terrible. And your fat burning wasn't actually that, it dropped down quite a lot from when, last summer, where obviously, you were in Ironman ready. Here, this has gone right back up. In fact, I think this is probably your strongest fat burning graph out of all of the tests we've done about 4 or 5. And one thing we did actually do after the last test was we did a lot of work around the anaerobic threshold and working at threshold. Now, normally, let's just stop this. Okay, I'm just going to get this off you. Well done, mate. Good stuff. Awesome. Let me take it down from 390 watts. Give your legs a little spin out.
I think I done a 370 last time, on the lights.
I think it might have been, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much got to 400.
Yeah.
So. Okay, that's down to what you see now. There you go. Yeah, usually with the anaerobic threshold, if you're doing it from a relatively untrained position, then you can actually move your anaerobic threshold up quite a lot. Even within, so say I've had a few people that have come to me, more fitness clients that haven't trained at all, their anaerobic threshold's been really low, fat burning's been really low, and then they've done like 4 to 6 weeks of training and their anaerobic thresholds jump right up. Once you are fit, then that's quite difficult to change your anaerobic threshold. We've been doing quite a lot of work on the Conquer Trainer at threshold and around there to try and push it, and obviously the tempo.
And we've been doing a lot
sessions,
in the past. I think when we did the first test, where it was 70 VO2, we were doing a lot of VO2 max work. So a lot of work in those ranges,
above
range,
threshold,
basically as hard as you can go.
Yeah.
And now for the last kind of 5 months, I've been trying to bring the anabolic threshold, anaerobic threshold.
Oh yeah, go on.
So much.
You're just a bit like a pin.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you look at periodisation, and I mean, there's lots of different thoughts and methodologies, in terms of training. But if you're doing a winter block, you're working more on power and developing the power. You always want to be developing power. You always want to be, trying to move it up. But obviously, you can concentrate more on power training through the winter, where you're not going to be going out and doing those longer rides so much. So we were doing a lot of that. We're doing a lot of work above anaerobic threshold, so a lot more anaerobic work, where it's now, obviously, you've started to go out and do a lot more longer endurance rides, staying in the zones and actually working. Before, I think, probably a couple of years ago, even with the testing, which is quite a common thing for a lot of athletes still to push too hard in all their sessions. So I think even in your longer sessions, you're probably going out maybe in like zone 3 as opposed to zone 4, whereas now you've been a lot more. And this, I mean, definitely just from looking at it, I can see it's the best fat burning.
Well, from this, basically what I gauged was, okay, my kind of middle of zone 3, pushing around 260 watts, that's exactly what I'm doing. The guard I'm going to train 260 watts. So that's exactly what I've been sticking to for the last 4 months. And then easy rides and easy so. And
that's the proof's in the pudding often, where you will actually train in those heart rate zones, or you'll see that. I mean, when we look at the graphs in a minute, of course, you will see that fat utilisation come up in those zones. Or if somebody had been, maybe there's normally zone 2 and zone 3 are the biggest fat burning zones, but sometimes, let's say you weren't working hardly at all in zone 2, but you were doing loads in zone 3, you might get this kind of, bump up, and it just shows that that's where you are working. I'm just going to just get the reports ready on here.
Sorry?
Oh, that's much better. Can you just pull this window in, mate? I guess you can't.
No, I can't. When it's in presentation.
Brian, if you don't feel any water now.
Thank you so much.
I know you're allowed to have water now.
Thanks.
Did anyone else want one at all? No? My dad, do you want any?
So I missed the preparation phase. Do you can drink water beforehand or?
Yeah, for 3 hours before, basically nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
You can drink water, but
Well,
you
it's
can't.
on.
That's it. You can't.
Okay.
But I didn't have. I think I had a few sips of water.
Okay.
Yeah. It's quite early. So,
And you weren't training this morning, so you were.
No, I did a 100 k's yesterday, just to the regatta and back. But it was probably top of zone 2 around there. I've had a bit of flu over the last week and a half ago, so I'm kind of just slightly chesty, but I think I'm over it now.
That might have caused the top end,
All the time, yeah. But I think the majority of the top end not being that high is because I just haven't been doing the VO2 Max trainings on the bike. So, but that said, it's still quite close to what it was, eh?
Oh yeah.
I think the real positive thing for me is to see the threshold, what's that?
What? The anaerobic.
The anaerobic threshold getting closer.
Anabolic something else.
Yeah. Yeah, anaerobic threshold getting closer to the max. That's quite cool because I've been working hard to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm actually holding higher watts at that, just below that threshold, which means I can just carry on the whole day at higher watts, just kind of feeding myself, which is much better than actually having a high VO2 max. So it looks like the percentage is a lot closer as well. It's cool.
Your fat, just doing the reports here, the fat burning graph has changed quite a quite a lot. You know, before it only went up to about, I think on the first test it was very low, but then once you were fit it went up to about 70% or so. I don't think it's gone up much more than 70% on a lot of the tests. It's changed a little bit, but not that much. Whereas this is obviously now in zone 1, you know, it's up and around between 80 to 100% fat burning here, you know, and then in zone 2, what's it dipping down from probably from 75 to 50.
My zone 2's gotten a lot bigger.
Yeah.
From what I can see is maybe like 5 beats higher.
And your anaerobic threshold has actually gone up by probably about 7 beats, I think. I think it was 169 last time, so that has moved up quite a lot. Let's go into I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but so this is the first page of a report that you'd get. There is also a resting test, which I mentioned at the beginning, which is a different report as well. So, but this is obviously the exercise test report. This is the first page you would get. So at the top, you've got over here. There we go. Screen in a bit. 80, so anaerobic threshold 176. We've moved that up from last time, which is good. VO2 at your anaerobic threshold 54. Now, I think
it's much better. It's almost 4 higher.
It's gone up,
4 higher, and it's within 82% of the max, which is great.
Yeah. And 66, and I mean you did 69 last time, so you know maybe a bit flu, maybe obviously not doing the sessions, but it's still, that's a high score anyway, you know, so that's absolutely fine. And yeah, like Ryan said, I mean 82% you want this, you want your VO2 at threshold to be as close to max as possible, but yeah, 80 to 90%, you know, that's really good.
And what's the recovery number? What is that?
Recovery, that's just... Okay, so yeah, we did a 2 minute recovery. You maxed, you got up to, you actually got up to 185 heart rate, but yeah, we got 184 there as your max heart rate. It did go to 185. Recovery, so after, from when we pressed the recovery button, it was on 182. After a minute, heart rate was down to 166, and after 2 minutes, I think was that 149? Yeah, 149. Yeah. And then what we're doing, we're setting all the training zones from the anaerobic threshold. So basically, Ryan's anaerobic threshold's gone up. Yeah, it was 169 last time, so it's gone up about 7 beats. So all of the training zones have also gone up. And often, you know, if you're trying to increase the top end, or you're racing more short distance, you know, sprints or Olympics, or shorter cycling races, then if you're always doing that, if you probably heard the analogy of building a base to get a higher peak. If your base is only this big, your peak's only going to be this big. So, you know, to actually still work and be a really good, you know, more sprint athlete, actually increasing that base is going to lift that up, and you know, we can see that actually you've increased your fat burning, you've increased your base, and it's moved everything up, and your training zones up as well, which is great. And then the next page is the graph. I'll come back to the zones in a minute. So yeah, as you said, so zone 1, you know, predominantly you're burning, you know, probably about 90% in zone 1. Here you've got the averages down here. So as a mean, the total calories in zone 1 was about 9.2, and you're burning 7.8 calories of fat. Zone 2 usually is the best fat burning zone. Sometimes it's not, but for most people it usually is. And we can see it's 7.9 as an average calories of fat there. Sometimes you might not burn as much, so as you can see, you know, in zone 2 he's burning more like between 70 and down to 50, and he's burning more like kind of 90% up here, but you burn more calories at the higher heart rate. So, you know, as a percentage then, you know, the calories is actually more fat there as well. 5.9 calories of fat in zone 3, and actually you go up 6.1 in zone 4 as well. So probably as well, when you're doing your training, often, you know, we'll be riding recovery or we'll be riding in endurance sort of more in zone 2, but then pumping up, you know, into zone 4 for those Strava segs and yeah, things like that.
And for me, what's interesting is just with the, like, especially with the long distance stuff, it means that I'm probably going to need to fill up with a lot more calories at the higher end when I'm racing around 60 heart rate or towards the top end.
Yeah.
I have to fuel up more.
We can work that out from the raw data as well. And I mean, even into zone 5. Now this, I mean, it's stopping it at 184. Obviously, you can go. That went up to 185. You could probably get up even higher. What's the most you've ever got your heart rate on the bike?
I think it was 193 or 192.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, with the long day yesterday and Friday. Probably. It's a bit of a dip as well with the heart rate, so not being.
Well, you would have. I mean, even yesterday, you know, with the training that you've done. I mean, you know, you're not doing this totally fresh. So, to hit the top end, your legs aren't 100% fresh. So, you know, that can have obviously that effect on the top. VO2 Max.
After a couple of days of training, your heart rate starts to get a bit lower.
Right, here, actually, we can see here's some trends of previous tests, and it shows a couple of things. It shows VO2 at anaerobic threshold, and you can see that's obviously it's gone up through the different tests, but then here it's you know, it's much better. It's really shot up even more, and then your aerobic baseline has come up a hell of a lot. And this is what's the important thing in terms of the fat burning. If we go back to this graph here, you can see I have got some of Ryan's other tests, but they're on the other laptop, so I won't have time to show them. But basically here you can see it is about 20 beats. It's 19 beats lower, but before it was a lot lower. Your aerobic baseline. So now, you know, you can comfortably work at 157 heart rate, top of zone 2, bottom of zone 3.
Pushing that
260 and watts. That, I mean, that years ago, I mean, that was your anaerobic threshold was around there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so, that's, you know, that's changed a lot. And this, we still can move this up, but the whole shape of this graph has moved up a lot.
You know, the thing for me about doing this over the last kind of 4 years, it's just been like such a learning process, just going from where I started to now. And like I don't think I would be able to get to, you know, holding that kind of wattage at that level had I not known. Like it would have been totally blind. I don't think I would have been able to do it at all without knowing actually these values. You know, just it's been key.
That's it. I mean, it's creating that dashboard again so that you know, it's like anything, you want to be benchmarking what you're doing so that you can see yourself improving. Obviously, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, when I was racing years ago, and I went back to, I used to do more of an anaerobic sport, more like Tae Kwon Do and stuff like that, and it was probably a similar weight to what I am now, as a sort of, a bit bigger, and that, my VO2 might have been high, but my fat burning would have been useless because I wasn't doing any endurance stuff. And then, 12 years ago, then when I got into Ironman and was training, the first year or two, I was probably training incorrectly. I was like a lot of people do when you train too hard, in all your sessions, or you go and do your long bike ride, but maybe you're pushing that little bit too hard on the way back, and it can be the difference of 5 to 10 beats, which is nothing, but then you're coming in feeling, pretty flaked out, and then the next day, you can't, you can't train as well. And the important thing is looking at that whole training week structure, so that if, then you are going out and riding for 6 hours in zone 2, coming back in zone 3, the next day you actually feel fresh, and you start to build this fat utilisation so that then you can, the aerobic baseline moves, and then obviously you're working at a higher heart rate, but you're still burning fat. And often what happens is most people go out and they do the same thing, and never really improve that much, so they sort of plateau. Whereas actually if you take a step back, and running's the funny one where you actually, you have to try and then go down and run in zone 2, and it's like, you're literally shuffling or walking and trying to get people to do that, they're like, no, but if you do it, and you actually do it, and when you've done it yourself, and that's the key, to do it on yourself, like, you've been doing and using the data, I've done it on myself, I've trained thousands of athletes, and the people that have done it, will come back and go, God, yeah, no, it works 100%, and actually you can see the difference, and you can see, how, how to train properly, so it's I think, in terms of testing, obviously there is blood lactate testing, which is good for other things, but you get a lot more from gaseous exchange. So that'd be one thing we'd be looking to.
Can you do blood testing at the same time as a gas?
You can, yeah, you can. Yeah,
is that something you do as well?
Yeah, we used to do. I used to do it as well, but unless you're in a university or a hospital environment, it's quite difficult to do it. They have a lot of portable kits, but they're not that accurate, the blood lactating kits. But you do get other information from that. But I'd say if it was a choice between two, you get a lot more from this, and it's a lot less invasive as well. Than, people having their ears pricked and stuff. But if that's something you want to do, then I'd say you can still go and get it done. So those are the reports. So there's the zones as well. So normally, again, I'm sure most of you know all about this, but zone 1 would tend to be more of a recovery zone. Zone 2 and 3 are going to be more of your endurance zones, more of your aerobic zones, so they tend to be the highest ones that you burn the highest amount of fat in, or where you can burn the most highest amount of fat in.
Yeah, I'm usually training like around there, somewhere there.
Yeah. And then tempo or sub-threshold, so something like something like an Olympic or a half Ironman, you could be working up and around zone 4. Yeah, and then anything above. Now this, sometimes they have 3 zones within zone 5 as well. Have like A, B, and C. That's a little bit more technical, but there is quite a big zone sometimes, zone 5. So on this report, it has it so that it's only about 10 beats, but you've got your heart rate up to 190, 192. So
zone 5 is essentially you've gone past your point of no return, right? That's your unsustainable.
You can work above I mean, you can still work anaerobically and above your, above your anaerobic threshold for still a fair amount of time. So, I mean, that's where lactate tolerance and whatnot, comes into play. But yeah, normally you're looking probably at about 90 minutes or so of anaerobic before you, if you weren't taking on board, about 90 minutes or so of anaerobic before you, if you weren't taking on board, sugars and fueling, then that's where you start to bonk down.
Yeah, I think the training we've done in the past, like from concrete training with like very heavy watts, it's usually like sets of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you take a break, and it's quite.
It's in and out. Like the training, normally you dip in and out.
Yeah.
But I mean, on a sprint distance triathlon or a time trial, you're going to go. Your heart rate's going to go straight up and around threshold, and then you can work at that. And that's dependent on the athlete and how much you trained your body to do that. But you could work at least for an hour and a half if you're conditioned enough to do that. Yeah, obviously, in all of these zones, then you can see how much sugar you're burning, how much fat you're burning. So from there, you can work out how much you need to be taking back. Obviously, the advantage of if you were doing short, sharp blasts, or if you're doing a more anaerobic race, is where if you are doing it as blasts, when you're falling back below your anaerobic threshold, if you're falling back in zone 2 zone 3 and 4, if you're burning a lot of fat in those zones, your recovery is going to be really good, because obviously you're working aerobically, you're going from working anaerobic straight to working aerobically, rather than still being burning sugar in zone 4 and 3, or a high percentage of sugar. So yeah, those are the reports. We can print out the raw data, which go back to the session, is what you saw. Basically, all of the numbers up here. It does actually go, like I said, it does go. There's calories and a few other things, but we're missing those columns just because of the projector. But yeah, you can then see exactly. I mean, we could actually see what's the maximum amount of fat calories you burn, what heart rate. So there's 7.6 there, 8.9, 9.1. So let's say it was 9.1 was the most calories of fat that you burn. That would be at a heart rate of 139. So again, like if it was a fitness client, or if it's somebody that was just going to lose weight, say just work between 135 and 140, you're going to really be burning the maximum amount of fat calories.
But obviously, Brian's pretty well trained, so
Yeah.
his zones are pretty distinct.
Yeah.
If you get someone who's really unfit,
Yeah.
are these zones like literally?
Big time. Yeah.
Like
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes there's more.
And how do you?
Yeah.
So how do you tell them to train? It's like
You still, I mean, yeah, no, you still. I mean, they're not necessarily that much smaller in terms of, most of the zones are about 10 beats. Sort of 5 to 10 beats. If they are very untrained, then yes, it might be a bit smaller, but they just work in those zones. So obviously, if you're doing it, I mean, that would be somebody really unconditioned. If it was, let's say they were all 5 beats or something like that, which it wouldn't be, but they would sit on the bike and stay to that thing until they could, expand that. But most of the zones are normally about 10 beats. It just all shifts. So it's like, here's a shifted up.
I think I had a tiny zone, like very small zone 3 when I started, and really big zone 4. I basically, when I was on training, I was just going out and hitting it, because that's what I thought running was. I thought, going out for a run today, going to hit it as hard as I can. So when I went for my first test, it was really big zone 4, no zone 3, like not too much zone 2, bigger zone 1. It's kind of like over 4 years, just all stretched apart. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's got it here.
I'm not going to run it through the projector just because. So, yeah, your first test.
What year was that?
You was 2010, and you were 84 kilos. Your VO2 max was 45, and your your VO2 at anaerobic threshold was 32. So obviously a lot lower than now. Your anaerobic threshold was 155. So that's where we set all of your training zones from. Let's have a look.
166.
So, you know, it's still, even if it was less conditioned, you've still got a decent amount of zones to work in. But you can see on that graph, you know, he went up to about 60-70%, and then you can see it's very linear in terms of, you know, straight down, whereas obviously on this one, now it's up a lot higher and goes across a lot more. And then, let's have a look. Yeah, so then it was 58 was your max, and 44 was the VO2 at anaerobic threshold on the second test. 169 on the anaerobic threshold, and again, you can look. I mean, you can see this was the second one. I mean, still not that much fat burning, you know, compared to this one. But obviously, the VO2 has gone up a lot since his first test. And then the last one. Anaerobic threshold was 167, so the one before that was 169, so it was around about the same on the anaerobic threshold. The VO2 max was high, 69, but it was 48 at anaerobic threshold. So this one, the important thing, is the VO2 at anaerobic threshold has gone up to 54.
And that's exactly what we said we
were going to do.
Because I was like, well, you know, that's a great VO2 max score, feeling chuffed about it. But like, doesn't mean anything if I can't sustain close to it or anything yet. So the last couple of months we're like, okay, cool, long threshold rides,
yeah.
And it's gone up now it's gone up by 6 now.
And you can see again on that graph, the test that we did before, where you had a very high VO2 max. This was over the winter. Again, fat burning, you know, was nothing like what it is on today. So it just shows that, I mean, you can change your fitness. Your fitness, you know, will change. It can change very quickly. You know, you can make big improvements in 6 weeks. You know, in terms of any of this. And similarly, you know, if you don't train, you know, you go the other way quite quickly as well, you know. So, you know, then there are other factors, obviously, like strength and when we're looking at the bike, power training, you know, and really working on developing power in the legs that are going to have an effect on, you know, pumping the blood back to the heart. It's not just how, you know, strong your heart is, it's that, you know, it's whether the legs can actually, you know, generate that blood flow back and around the system. So yeah, this is one thing that we use, you know, for training. But there are obviously other things that we look at, and like you said earlier, you know, there's often things. There's external factors. You know, there's kit. There's, you know, are you aerodynamic? What are you looking? You know, there's a number of different things in nutrition and whatnot. But this does have quite an important part in the overall.
The fact that he did the test, having not had anything for 3 hours before, does that mean that's how we should go out and train, and then nothing for 3 hours before?
Not necessarily.
Why does it make a difference?
Normally, so basically, what it is if you're doing the resting test, it's actually 10 hours of only water. So what you'd normally do is come in the morning but not have breakfast and just come and do it. And the reason being is if you've had any sugars or recently, then it picks it up straight away. So the RQ, rather than it trying to find the ratio of what your body is usually burning at rest. So if you're walking around, through the day, there's a percentage of what fats to sugars you're burning. If you've just taken on board a load of sugars, it's going to pick that straight up. So it kind of flunks the test quite easily. For the exercise test, because the resting heart rate, the heart rates are a bit higher. It's only 3 hours of burning water. But in terms of training, you can do glycogen depleted rides or runs, and that can have quite a good boost on fat utilisation and kicking into fat stores. There's been studies that have shown that also doing those glycogen depleted sessions will actually have a rebound effect on your glycogen stores, so they'll increase your glycogen stores, so obviously another positive factor. You don't want to do them all the time, obviously, but there is definitely, some studies to show that, it's worth doing. I mean, that's why often people sometimes they'll train. As long as it's in an aerobic heart rate, then you know that you've got the fuel because it's in your system, your fat stores, to go out and ride at those, at those heart rates without bonking out because you're not burning the sugar. Obviously, if you're going and you're looking from a performance point of view, so if you're doing a breakthrough session or a rehearsal session, you want to be doing those sessions as if you're racing and taking on board the right amount, at the time, so that you're keeping obviously your petrol tanks as full as possible. There's lots of different ways to do it, and it just depends on where you're at and what you're looking trying to achieve at the time. Good stuff. Well, hopefully, any more questions about?
Where do you do this?
I do it either here or just down the road in the Pedal Studio. So if you want to do one, then either book in through Physio for Life reception or contact me, and then I can kind of do it with them. Like I say, for the if you want to do, most people do the resting test and the exercise test together, so you get kind of everything done. And it's only, I think, like £25 more for